Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to our online interview today. We really appreciate it. We know how busy you are. And again, we thank you for being a part of this online interview. My name is Michael Antonellis. I'm the National Director of Marketing Communications for the National Brain Tumor Society. We are conducting this web interview today to recognize Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, which comes in September every single year. And our topic today is pediatric brain tumors forging ahead. We are here with my colleague, Ann Kingston. Ann is a PhD. She is the Director of Research and Science Policy for the National Brain Tumor Society. Ann, thank you so much for being a part of this.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Mike.
So before we start the interview, I wanted to let everyone know that we'll have about 5 or 10 minutes after the interview for you to pose questions. So we ask you to use the chat feature in the software to ask your questions. And we're also going to be interviewing and actually recording this particular interview today, so you'll be able to tune back at some point in the future. So, Ann, I turn to you and I'm asking, just to start things off, can you describe for me the landscape right now for pediatric brain tumor patients?
Thank you, Mike. Well, I think we can start off by answering that question with a brief review of the statistics. The number of people living with a primary brain and central nervous system tumor in the US today has been estimated to be around 688,000, of whom 28,000 are children and adolescents. Of this 688,000, there are 20% of those individuals are living with a malignant brain tumor. This year, there's estimated to be around 16,600 deaths that will be attributed to a primary brain malignant and CNS tumor. And of these, more than 550 children will be included. The estimated number of new cases diagnosed in the US this year is around 78,000, of whom over 4,600 will be children and adolescents. Brain and CNS tumors are the most common cancer among the 0 to 19 age group, with leukemia coming in second, followed by other types of cancers. Pediatric brain tumors are now described as the most common cause of cancer-related death in children up until the age of 19. The results of a study published this very month from this Center for Health Statistics has shown that brain tumors now are around 30%, represent 30% of cancer-related deaths in children. The landscape shows that there are over 120 brain tumor types. And in terms of pediatric tumors, gliomas in the 0 to 14 age group represent around 53%. Gliomas arise from cells in the brain called glial cells. And of these gliomas, the high-grade gliomas that are the most malignant, grade 3 and grade 4, represent an estimated 11% of all pediatric brain tumors. The high-grade gliomas include anaplastic astrocytoma, oligodendric glioma, diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, and others as shown here. This group of patients face a dismal clinical outcome with a 5-year survival rate of only 15 to 30%. And even more devastatingly, DIPG patients face a 5-year survival rate of only around 1%. That is, if you look at it, about as long as a typical school year. So treatments for pediatric brain tumors can vary enormously depending on the type of tumor, depending on the location of the tumor, depending on the age of the child, but generally incorporate surgery, radiation therapy, chemotherapy, and more recently, some molecularly targeted therapies. However, in the high-grade glioma group, there are no standard of care options for treatment of these individuals. For DIPG, surgery is not even often undertaken because of concerns over safety, and essentially only radiation therapy is considered to be a standard of care here. And this lack of progress has really, despite the improvements in neurosurgery, radiotherapy, and chemotherapy, there have been very little improvements in survival rates. And moreover, despite a significant number of trials for children with high-grade glioma, there have been little improvement in patient outcomes. And we have to ask ourselves, why is this the case? And we think that a major contributing factor to this is really because we've been treating pediatric high-grade gliomas as though they were adult tumors.
And so, Anne, what makes pediatric brain tumors different from adult patients?
So one of the major concerns in considering pediatric versus adult tumors is that although there are commonalities in molecular and biology characteristics, we now know there are fundamental differences in molecular characteristics. And this is thought to arise from some of the cell types that are involved in adult and pediatric brain tumors, as well as the mechanisms that drive these tumors in adults versus pediatric patients. And this requires that treatment cannot be based on data from adult trials. Indeed, if we look at the part of the standard of care for adult high-grade glioma, temozolomide, this chemotherapeutic agent is ineffective in pediatric high-grade glioma patients. Approaches to treatment may also be different because we have to consider a greater potential for harm in a developing child, a developing brain, a developing body, and treatments may produce side effects that can have longer-term consequences on the childhood survivor's health. Childhood pediatric brain tumors are rare and essentially historically have not attracted much investment from industry. Children are regarded as vulnerable and by society are thought to require special protections, which generates ethical considerations in terms of the type of research that can be conducted, as well as the processes whereby that research is approved. The small size and vulnerability of the pediatric population can create significant challenges in clinical trial design and trial recruitment.
So, Anne, let me ask you then, if you could describe a little bit about the key challenges to developing new treatments. What are those challenges?
Well, this slide illustrates some of those challenges. There are many, but top of the list probably is that a lack of funding to really fuel research, both basic discovery research and translational research. The NCI, private foundations, and philanthropic sources are really the major sources of funding, and constraints in budgets essentially restrict some of the ability to really fuel this in a way that it needs to be. Historically, there have been very rarely have cancer drugs been expressly developed for children. More commonly, drugs are tested in children after they've been shown to be safe and effective in one or more adult cancers. Biopsy tissue has essentially been difficult to access. Biopsy tissue is important for diagnosis, important for directing therapy, and critical for research purposes. So the lack of availability of biopsy tissue, particularly for brain tumors like DIPG, because of the concerns over safety of taking biopsy tissue, have retarded essentially our ability to undertake research in these tumors. Tumor heterogeneity, this essentially relates to the differences in molecular and biology characteristics of tumors between patients within the same diagnostic category, and even within a patient's own tumor, molecular differences may occur in different regions of the tumor. This means essentially that diagnosis may be inaccurate, and then directing therapy and treatment planning can be a challenge. The field needs better models that more faithfully recapitulate the cellular, molecular, and developmental aspects of pediatric brain tumors. These preclinical models are really important in being able to undertake basic and translational discovery, as well as in driving drug discovery efforts. Issues with getting therapeutics across the blood-brain barrier is another challenge. This barrier is a safety net, which keeps out substances and neurotoxins from the brain normally, but also can impede access of drugs. Biomarkers are essentially biological indicators that reflect the state of health or the state of disease of a patient, and these are really important in being able to define prognosis, predict treatment response, and moreover for their use as surrogate endpoints in clinical trials, whereby we may be able to define more early assessment of clinical response than overall survival. So here we're lacking validated biomarkers. In addition, the small patient population size makes clinical trials difficult indeed. When we look across clinical trials, they may be even competing for the same population. So this all impedes the development of drugs. And the last point, essentially, is that with novel agents and developing novel agents, it may be hard to predict and then study what may be the longer-term consequences of these treatments, because we're looking at testing these agents in the developing child.
So then, Anne, in kind of dovetailing on those points, so what kind of research advances have been made that are helping the field find better treatments?
Well, I think in that respect, there are several aspects that have advanced for adult brain tumors, and particularly for pediatric brain tumors. I think we need to recognize in the past several years, there's been tremendous growth in our understanding of the biology of these tumors. This table illustrates some of the key genetic aberrations that have been identified for several types of tumors, and have provided a really important basis to start to understand biology, get deeper insights into mechanisms that may drive tumor growth. In particular, for high-grade glioma in 2012, the first histone mutations in human cancer were discovered. And these were discovered in pediatric glioblastoma and DIPG patients. This finding was remarkable too by the fact that these mutations were found at very high frequencies, which really indicated the importance of these mutations in initiating tumor formation. The landmark research studies in medulloblastoma have also shown by molecular characterization the identification of 4 biologically distinct and clinically relevant subgroups that have enabled treatment planning as well as clinical trial design, and have really helped move the field in terms of thinking about therapeutic targets. The advances in molecular characterization in terms of both adult and pediatric brain tumors was something that has been applied now and incorporated into the World Health Organization's classification of tumors. This very year, the WHO have updated its classification to incorporate molecular information into the definitions of some diagnostic entities, including pediatric brain tumors.
So Anne, my next question to you is, so really what's needed to be more effective when trying to find and develop new treatments?
Well, we clearly need to maintain our advocacy and application of funding and resources to really fuel research. We need to really consider that we need to bring together and foster collaborations between academia and industry, patient advocacy organizations, as well as regulatory authorities to improve the pediatric neuro-oncology drug development landscape. Although we've made great strides in progress in terms of understanding tumor biology, we're really only at the beginning. And essentially, we need to better understand how the findings we have acquired to date can be exploited for developing therapeutic strategies. We also need to enable drug discovery and basic science through the development of better preclinical models. The field has generated in the past several years some excellent models that are more faithfully recapitulate the brain tumors in pediatric patients. But we need to continue to build this platform to be able to drive research. Industry involvement, we need to maintain that we need to incentivize industry and bring them in early into the research process. Because it's a relatively small population of patients, we need to be very collaborative in the way that we share data and tissue so that we can transfer knowledge efficiently and maximize the work that we do with such a small patient population.
And we've talked about the key landscape, we've talked about challenges, we've talked about some of the challenges around treatments themselves. And now I want to ask you, tell me a little bit more about how the National Brain Tumor Society is trying to change the status quo right now.
Well, as you mentioned, Mike, September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month and marks essentially the launch by National Brain Tumor Society of Project Impact, a campaign to defeat pediatric brain tumors. This is a major commitment by NBTS for deep and sustainable funding of research that will accelerate and advance research to treatments for the pediatric brain tumor patients. An initial focus of this research is really on pediatric high-grade gliomas because of the immense and unmet urgent medical need here. The effort here is really enabling, we think, ultimately the development of the first ever standard of care for pediatric high-grade gliomas. We're also very proud to recognize that St. Baldrick's Foundation is now a partner with us in this endeavor. The Defeat Pediatric High-Grade Glioma initiative includes some of the top researchers in the field. These investigators bring unique and complementary expertise. Dr. Stefan Pfister in Germany, Dr. Nada Jabado in Canada, Dr. Susie Baker in St. Jude's, and Dr. Guy in St. Jude's. The infrastructure of this effort is set up in a way that each of these investigators lead specific teams. In the case of Dr. Pfister, we have a research discovery core that is focused on target identification. For Dr. Jabado, we have a core that is focused on biomarker development and even liquid biopsy exploration. Dr. Baker is looking at characterizing and developing preclinical models that will help drive basic research as well as drug discovery efforts that will also be going on at St. Jude's in terms of a high throughput screening and preclinical testing. This infrastructure is set up in a way that it allows for data and material sharing in real time so that discoveries from basic discovery can be accelerated and moved quickly through to preclinical testing. Ultimately, the intention is to leverage collaborative relationships with clinical trial consortia, including the Pacific Pediatric Neuro-Oncology Consortium, with the goal of running biomarker-informed early phase clinical trials. We think this collaborative is a new fundamental model that will help drive and accelerate the discovery of treatments for what we recognize as young and most vulnerable patients.
Great. Anne, thank you very much for your time, and thank all of you for tuning in.